January 16, 1917, 1500 hours, and German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmerman sits at his desk in the Wilhelmstrasse in Berlin, composing what he believes is a brilliant strategic masterstroke that will keep America out of the European war while simultaneously crippling British supply lines. The telegram he's drafting to German Ambassador Heinrich von Eckart in Mexico City proposes a secret military alliance that would encourage Mexico to attack the United States, promising the return of Texas, New Mexico and Arizona in exchange for Mexican cooperation. Zimmerman has every reason to believe his message will reach Mexico safely because German diplomatic cables are transmitted through what should be secure channels encoded in ciphers that the Foreign Ministry considers unbreakable, and routed through neutral countries that have no reason to intercept German communications. What Zimmerman could not possibly know, what no German diplomat could imagine in their most paranoid nightmares, is that British naval intelligence has been reading German coded messages for more than 2 years, that his telegram will be intercepted within hours of transmission, and that within 6 weeks, the decoded message will be published in American newspapers, transforming American public opinion overnight and dragging the United States into a war that will destroy the German Empire and reshape the entire 20th century. The German government's decision to send the Zimmerman telegram comes from desperation, from the stalemate on the Western Front where millions of men have died without decisive victory, from Britain's naval blockade that's slowly strangling Germany's economy and starving her civilian population, and from the calculation that unrestricted submarine warfare, scheduled to resume February 1st, will almost certainly bring America into the war, unless Germany can create diversions that keep American forces occupied defending their own territory. Arthur Zimmerman, 54 years old and serving as Foreign Secretary since November 1916, represents a new type of German diplomat, less aristocratic than his predecessors, more willing to consider unconventional strategies, a professional bureaucrat who's risen through the Foreign Ministry on merit rather than birth. He's been dealing with the Mexican situation for years, watching revolutionary chaos south of the Rio Grande and calculating how Germany might exploit Mexican-American tensions to German advantage. The strategic logic behind the telegram seems sound to Zimmerman and his advisors, as Mexico has legitimate grievances against the United States, dating from the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848, when Mexico lost half her territory, including Texas, California, New Mexico and Arizona, wounds that still fester in Mexican national consciousness 70 years later. The Mexican political situation in January 1917 is extraordinarily complex, with President Venustiano Carranza leading a revolutionary government that's finally achieving some stability after years of brutal civil war. Carranza's constitutionalist forces have defeated the armies of Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata, though both revolutionary leaders remain at large with significant followings, and the country is exhausted from fighting, its economy shattered, its people longing for peace. The relationship between Mexico and the United States could hardly be worse, poisoned by American military interventions that violated Mexican sovereignty and demonstrated contempt for Mexican national pride. In April 1914, American forces occupied the port city of Veracruz, ostensibly to prevent arms shipments to the dictator Victoriano Huerta, but the intervention killed hundreds of Mexicans and enraged the entire nation regardless of political faction. Even more inflammatory was General John Pershing's punitive expedition of 1916 when nearly 10,000 American troops invaded northern Mexico, chasing Pancho Villa after his raid on Columbus, New Mexico, an operation that made Villa a national hero despite his banditry, and convinced many Mexicans that the United States would never respect Mexican sovereignty. Heinrich von Eckart, the German ambassador in Mexico City to whom Zimmerman addresses his telegram, is 58 years old, a career diplomat who served in various difficult postings, a man who understands Latin American politics well enough to know that Zimmerman's proposal faces enormous practical obstacles. Eckart has been cultivating relationships with Mexican officials for years, distributing German money to influence Mexican newspapers, encouraging Mexican nationalists to view Germany as a potential ally against American imperialism, laying groundwork for exactly the kind of alliance Zimmerman now proposes. But Eckart also knows that Mexico lacks the military capacity to wage war against the United States, that the Mexican army is poorly equipped and exhausted from civil war, that Mexican industry cannot produce the weapons and ammunition necessary for modern warfare, and that American military superiority would make any Mexican invasion of the United States a suicide mission regardless of German financial support. The text of the Zimmerman telegram, as drafted on January 16th and transmitted the next day, represents one of history's most consequential pieces of diplomatic correspondence, encoded in cipher 0075 and transmitted through multiple channels to ensure delivery. The telegram instructs Eckhart that Germany will begin unrestricted submarine warfare on February 1st, an action expected to bring America into the war, and proposes that in that event, Eckhart should approach President Carranza with an offer of generous financial support and German understanding that Mexico should reconquer the lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The telegram further suggests that Eckhart should propose to Carranza that Mexico might mediate between Germany and Japan, encouraging Japanese entry into the war against the United States. A proposal that reveals how desperate German strategic thinking has become. The Germans are gambling that the promise of recovering lost territories will outweigh Mexico's military weakness, that American forces tied down defending their southern border cannot be shipped to France, and that the psychological impact of fighting on American soil will break American will to intervene in Europe. The transmission of the Zimmerman telegram follows a circuitous route designed to avoid British interception, or so the Germans believe. The message travels via multiple paths, including German underwater cable to neutral Sweden, then overland to the German embassy in Washington, and finally through American State Department cables to Mexico City, a routing made possible by President Wilson's naive permission for Germany to use American diplomatic channels for messages related to peace negotiations. The Germans encode the message in diplomatic cipher 0075, a code they believe is secure because they don't know that British naval intelligence obtained the cipher's codebooks from captured German materials, including documents recovered from the German cruiser SMS Magdeburg when she ran aground in the Baltic in 1914, and papers seized during British operations in Mesopotamia. The Germans encrypt the telegram not once but twice, first in the diplomatic code and then in a second cipher for extra security. But these precautions prove worthless because British codebreakers have both keys, though they must work carefully to decode the message without revealing how much they know.
Room 40 of the British Admiralty in London houses the most sophisticated code-breaking operation in the world in 1917. A collection of mathematicians, linguists, chess masters, and cryptographic geniuses who've been intercepting and decoding German messages since the beginning of the war. The unit operates in absolute secrecy, its very existence unknown to the British public and most government officials. Its personnel sworn to secrecy about their work, understanding that revealing their capabilities would cause Germany to change codes and eliminate their intelligence advantage. The room itself is physically unremarkable, an office space in the Admiralty Old Building, where men and women work at desks covered with coded messages, frequency tables, and cribs, captured phrases that help unlock the mathematical puzzles of enemy ciphers. Nigel de Grey, one of Room 40's most talented cryptanalysts, receives the intercepted Zimmerman telegram sometime around January 17th, recognizing immediately that this message uses the German diplomatic code rather than naval ciphers, requiring different techniques and codebooks to decrypt. The decryption of the Zimmerman telegram takes several days as de Grey and his colleague William Montgomery work through the mathematical substitutions and linguistic patterns that transform the encoded groups of numbers into readable German text. By January 19th, they've produced a partial decryption that's good enough to reveal the telegram's explosive content, and both men understand immediately that they're holding a document that could change the course of the war. De Grey takes the partially decoded message to Admiral Reginald Hall, Director of Naval Intelligence and the man responsible for Room 40's operations, a brilliant and somewhat sinister figure known as Blinker Hall because of a nervous facial tic that makes him appear to wink constantly. Hall reads the decoded telegram and immediately recognizes its potential to bring America into the war, but he also understands that using this intelligence presents extraordinary challenges because revealing the telegram's contents to the Americans will inevitably lead to questions about how Britain obtained it, potentially exposing Room 40's capabilities and methods. Admiral Hall faces a delicate intelligence problem that requires him to walk a tightrope between exploiting valuable intelligence and protecting his sources and methods. If he simply hands the decoded telegram to the Americans and explains that British intelligence intercepted and decrypted German diplomatic cables, several disasters will follow. Germany will immediately change all her codes, eliminating Britain's intelligence advantage in one stroke. The Americans will be outraged to discover that Britain has been intercepting cables sent through American State Department facilities, violating both American sovereignty and Wilson's trust. American isolationists will claim the telegram is a British forgery designed to manipulate America into war, accusations that will be difficult to disprove without revealing Room 40's methods. And perhaps most seriously, publishing the telegram will reveal to the world that Germany has been using American diplomatic channels to transmit messages related to making war on America, a betrayal that might actually help Germany by making Wilson look foolish for trusting German assurances. Hull decides to wait, holding the decoded telegram for weeks while he searches for a way to release it without exposing British intelligence operations. His patience proves crucial because Room 40 soon intercepts a second transmission of the telegram, this one sent from the German embassy in Washington to von Eckart in Mexico City, using an older German diplomatic code, 13040, which the Mexicans also possess. This second version of the telegram provides Hull with a cover story he needs, because if British agents in Mexico can somehow obtain a copy of the telegram from Mexican sources, then Britain can claim they learned about it from Mexican contacts rather than from intercepting cables. Hull authorises a secret operation in Mexico City, where a British agent, working through an intermediary in the Mexican Telegraph Office, obtains a copy of the telegram as transmitted to von Eckart, providing Britain with a Mexican copy of the document that serves as plausible cover for how they obtained it. The decision about when and how to reveal the Zimmerman telegram to the Americans is complicated by President Wilson's own complex relationship with the war. Wilson has just won re-election in November 1916 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war," and he's currently attempting to mediate between the warring European powers, proposing peace without victory that would end the slaughter without crushing either side. Wilson genuinely believes in American neutrality, viewing the European war as a product of old-world imperialism and militarism that America should avoid, but he's also deeply committed to international law and civilized conduct in warfare, making him increasingly troubled by German submarine attacks that kill American civilians. The German decision to resume unrestricted submarine warfare on February 1st, sinking merchant ships without warning even if they carry American passengers, represents exactly the kind of barbarism that challenges Wilson's commitment to neutrality. But Wilson is a scholar, an idealist, a man who thinks in terms of principles rather than power politics, and he needs something more concrete than abstract violations of international law to convince himself and the American people that war is necessary. On February 19, 1917, Admiral Hull decides the time has come to share the Zimmerman telegram with the Americans. He arranges a meeting with Edward Bell, Secretary of the American Embassy in London, showing him the decoded telegram and explaining, somewhat deceptively, that British agents in Mexico obtained it from Mexican sources. Bell, shocked by the telegram's contents, immediately cables Washington requesting permission to receive an official copy of the document. On February 23rd, Hull meets with Walter Hines Page, the American ambassador to Britain, and formally presents him with the decoded telegram, along with the cover story about Mexican sources. Page, who's been advocating for American entry into the war for months, recognizes the telegram as exactly the kind of concrete evidence that might overcome American isolationism, and he cables the text to Washington with his strongest recommendation that Wilson take it seriously. President Wilson receives the decoded Zimmerman telegram on February 24th, reading it in disbelief, struggling to accept that Germany would actually propose such a cynical alliance against the United States. Wilson has spent months defending German behavior to skeptical advisors, insisting that Germany's submarine campaign can be managed through diplomatic pressure, arguing that American entry into the war would be a tragedy that could be avoided through patient negotiation. But the Zimmerman telegram reveals German duplicity in the starkest terms, proving that while Germany has been making peaceful overtures through diplomatic channels, they've simultaneously been plotting to encourage Mexico to attack American territory. Wilson's initial response is cautious, wanting confirmation that the telegram is genuine before taking any action, understanding that if the document is a British forgery, responding to it would make him look foolish and damage whatever credibility he still has with Germany. The question of how to use the Zimmerman telegram divides Wilson's cabinet and advisors, as some argue for immediate publication to galvanize public opinion, while others counsel caution, warning that premature release might allow Germany to dismiss it as British propaganda. Secretary of State Robert Lansing, who's been pushing for war for months, argues that the telegram should be published immediately, that American public opinion will be transformed when citizens learn that Germany is plotting to give American territory to Mexico. Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels worries about verification, concerned that the telegram might be a forgery and that acting on false intelligence could be disastrous. Wilson himself remains uncertain, his natural caution warring with his growing anger at German betrayal, his commitment to peace conflicting with his recognition that Germany has made that peace impossible. Wilson decides to seek confirmation from the one source who can definitively prove the telegram's authenticity, the German government itself. On February 28th, Wilson authorizes the State Department to quietly inquire whether the German embassy in Washington transmitted such a message to Mexico. The inquiry is made through informal channels, and the German response is revealing through its evasiveness. The Germans neither confirm nor deny the telegram's existence, instead issuing vague statements about the unfriendliness of such questions, effectively admitting that something embarrassing has occurred, without explicitly acknowledging what. This non-denial denial convinces Wilson that the telegram is genuine, that Germany really did propose a Mexican attack on the United States, and that American neutrality has become morally untenable when one side is actively plotting against American territory. On March 1, 1917, the Zimmerman telegram is released to the American press, and the public reaction exceeds even the most optimistic predictions of those who wanted America in the war. Newspapers across the country print the telegram on their front pages, editorials explode with outrage, politicians who've been advocating neutrality suddenly discover reasons why war might be necessary after all. The telegram transforms abstract European quarrels into a concrete threat to American territory, making the war personal in ways that Belgian refugees and submarine attacks on British ships never could. Americans who've never heard of the Western Front or understand the complex web of European alliances can immediately grasp that Germany is plotting to give Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona to Mexico, an idea so offensive to American nationalism that it overcomes nearly all isolationist resistance. The German response to publication of the telegram reveals a catastrophic failure of diplomatic judgment that compounds the original mistake. German officials could deny the telegram's authenticity, claim it's a British forgery, and force the Allies to prove its genuineness without revealing their intelligence sources. Instead, on March 3rd, Arthur Zimmerman himself admits in a press conference that yes, he sent the telegram, yes, it proposed a Mexican-German alliance against the United States, and yes, he still thinks it was good strategy. This stunning confirmation eliminates any possibility that the telegram might be dismissed as Allied propaganda, proves that Germany really is plotting against the United States, and makes Zimmerman himself a figure of hatred in American popular culture. German-American newspapers that have been defending the fatherland suddenly fall silent, unable to explain why Germany would propose giving American territory to Mexico. German sympathizers in Congress, who've been blocking preparedness measures, find themselves politically isolated, their constituents demanding they support action against this German treachery. The Mexican response to the Zimmerman telegram reveals the practical impossibility of Zimmerman's proposed alliance, demonstrating how badly German strategists misunderstood Mexican politics and capabilities. President Carranza, when approached by von Eckart with Germany's proposal, immediately recognizes that war with the United States would be national suicide for Mexico. The Mexican army, though it's fought bravely during the revolution, cannot possibly defeat American forces that outnumber them, outgun them, and possess industrial capacity that Mexico completely lacks. Mexican generals, when asked about the feasibility of reconquering Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, report that such operations would require weapons, ammunition, and supplies that Mexico cannot produce and Germany cannot deliver across British-controlled Atlantic shipping lanes. The Mexican population, exhausted from revolutionary violence, has no appetite for a new war that would bring American armies deep into Mexican territory. Carranza makes polite noises to von Eckart about considering Germany's offer, but never seriously contemplates accepting it, understanding that Mexico's best hope for stability requires avoiding conflict with the United States, not provoking one. The impact of the Zimmerman telegram on American public opinion proves even more dramatic than its impact on government policy, as newspapers fan outrage into demands for action against German aggression. Political cartoons show the Kaiser offering American states to Mexico like a gambler dealing cards, suggesting that Germany views American territory as German property to dispose of as Germany sees fit. Veterans organisations that have been split between neutrality and intervention suddenly unite behind preparedness, demanding that America defend her territory against German schemes. Western states, particularly Texas, New Mexico and Arizona, the very territories Germany proposed to give to Mexico, erupt in fury at German presumption, with politicians from these states leading the charge toward war. German Americans who've maintained cultural ties to the fatherland find themselves suspected of disloyalty, accused of supporting plots against American sovereignty, facing pressure to prove their loyalty by denouncing Germany loudly and publicly. The telegram's revelation comes at precisely the moment when German submarine warfare is claiming American lives, as U-boats sink American merchant ships without warning, drowning American sailors whose deaths previously might have been dismissed as unfortunate accidents of war. The combination of submarine attacks killing Americans at sea and the Zimmerman telegram revealing German plots against American territory creates a perfect storm of public opinion that makes war seem inevitable. Wilson, who spent years keeping America neutral, delivers a speech to Congress on March 5th, requesting authority to arm American merchant ships for self-defense, a preparedness measure that Congress had been blocking, but now approves overwhelmingly. The vote shows how completely the Zimmerman telegram has shifted American political sentiment, transforming Congress from reluctant neutrality to eager preparation for conflict. The German strategic calculation behind the Zimmerman telegram proves disastrously wrong in every particular, demonstrating how badly Germany's leaders misunderstood American politics and psychology. The Germans assumed that promising Mexico the return of lost territory would create an irresistible temptation that would lead to Mexican attacks on the American border. But they failed to understand that Mexico lacked the military capacity to make such attacks meaningful. They assumed that America, if forced to defend her southern border, could not simultaneously send armies to France, but they underestimated American industrial capacity and organizational ability that would eventually put 2 million American soldiers in Europe. They assumed that the telegram would remain secret, that diplomatic cables sent through supposedly secure channels would not be intercepted and decoded, revealing their ignorance about British intelligence capabilities. Most fundamentally, they assumed that American isolationism was so strong that even evidence of German plots against American territory would not overcome resistance to European entanglement, completely misreading American nationalism and the rage that would follow from learning that Germany proposed giving American states to Mexico. Admiral Reginald Hall, watching American public opinion transform in response to the telegram's publication, allows himself a rare moment of satisfaction, knowing that Room 40's work has accomplished what years of British propaganda could not achieve. The codebreakers who decrypted the telegram, Nigel de Grey and William Montgomery, receive no public recognition for their work because exposing Room 40's capabilities remains more important than celebrating individual achievements. The British government carefully maintains the fiction that the telegram was obtained through Mexican sources rather than signals intelligence, protecting their code-breaking operations even as they exploit their results. Hall understands that the Zimmerman telegram represents intelligence work at its finest, not just intercepting and decoding enemy communications, but finding ways to exploit that intelligence without revealing sources and methods. Patient work that produces strategic results far exceeding the tactical value of any single message. On April 2, 1917, President Wilson addresses a joint session of Congress, requesting a declaration of war against Germany, citing unrestricted submarine warfare as the immediate cause, but clearly influenced by the broader pattern of German aggression that the Zimmerman telegram revealed. Wilson frames American entry into the war not as revenge for German plots against American territory, but as a crusade to make the world safe for democracy, elevating American intervention beyond mere national interest into a moral imperative. But the congressmen who vote for war 4 days later, authorizing American entry into the conflict, are motivated less by Wilson's soaring rhetoric about democracy than by cold fury at German schemes to dismember the United States. The telegram provides the concrete evidence of German malice that makes Wilson's idealistic argument seem realistic, proving that Germany really does threaten American interests in ways that require military response. The American mobilization that follows the declaration of war transforms the balance of power on the Western Front, though the full impact takes more than a year to materialize. American industry, already supplying the Allies with weapons and material, shifts to full war production, manufacturing artillery shells, airplanes, and military equipment on scales that European factories cannot match. American manpower, previously unavailable to the exhausted armies of Britain and France, begins training for deployment to Europe, with the first American troops landing in France in June 1917, and combat divisions arriving in strength by spring 1918. The psychological impact on Allied morale proves immediate and profound, as soldiers who've been fighting since 1914, exhausted and cynical and wondering if the war will ever end, suddenly gain hope that American numbers and resources will tip the balance toward victory. The German reaction to American entry into the war reveals belated recognition that the Zimmerman telegram was a catastrophic blunder that Germany's leaders would give anything to undo. Kaiser Wilhelm II, when he learns the full story of how the telegram was intercepted, decoded and published, rages at his intelligence services for failing to protect German communications, at his diplomats for their naive belief in cipher security, and at Zimmerman himself for confirming the telegram's authenticity when simple denial might have preserved some doubt. German military commanders, calculating how American entry will affect the strategic balance, recognize that Germany must win the war quickly before American forces arrive in strength, leading to the desperate offensives of spring 1918 that nearly break through Allied lines, but ultimately exhaust Germany's reserves without achieving victory. Arthur Zimmerman, the architect of the telegram disaster, quietly resigns as Foreign Secretary in August 1917, his career destroyed by the revelation that his clever plan to keep America out of the war instead accomplished exactly the opposite. The impact of American forces on the Western Front becomes decisive in the summer and fall of 1918, as fresh American divisions help stop the German spring offensives and then participate in the Allied counterattacks that finally break German resistance. American soldiers, inexperienced but enthusiastic and backed by seemingly unlimited supplies of ammunition and equipment, fight in major engagements at Château Thierry, Belleau Wood, and the Meuse-Argonne offensive, suffering heavy casualties but helping to convince German commanders that continuing the war is hopeless. By November 1918, with American armies growing stronger every month while German forces crumble from exhaustion, hunger and despair, Germany requests an armistice that ends the fighting and begins the process that will lead to the Treaty of Versailles and the destruction of the German Empire. The Zimmerman telegram's place in history becomes firmly established as historians analyse World War I, recognising it as one of those rare documents that fundamentally changed the course of events. Without the telegram, American entry into the war would likely have occurred eventually, due to submarine warfare, but possibly months or even years later, too late to affect the war's outcome. The telegram provided Wilson with the concrete evidence of German hostility that he needed to overcome his own commitment to neutrality and to convince Congress and the American people that war was necessary. The intelligence work that intercepted and decoded the telegram demonstrated the crucial importance of signals intelligence in modern warfare, establishing principles that would influence British and American intelligence operations through World War II and beyond. The German mistakes that led to the telegram's compromise, the overconfidence in cipher security, and the disastrous decision to confirm the telegram's authenticity became case studies in how not to conduct intelligence and diplomatic operations. Room 40's success in decrypting the Zimmerman telegram established British signals intelligence as a national strategic asset that would be expanded and refined in subsequent years. The lessons learned from managing the telegram's revelation, protecting sources and methods while exploiting intelligence, influenced how Britain handled ultra-intelligence during World War II, when British codebreakers at Bletchley Park decrypted German Enigma ciphers but carefully concealed their capabilities. Nigel de Grey himself went on to work at Bletchley Park during World War II, bringing experience from the Zimmerman operation to the next generation of codebreakers. The institutional knowledge preserved from Room 40 helped Britain maintain signals intelligence capabilities between the wars, ensuring that when World War II began, Britain had the foundation necessary to tackle new cryptographic challenges. The Mexican dimension of the Zimmerman telegram story reveals the practical impossibility of Germany's proposed alliance, demonstrating how disconnected German strategic thinking had become from reality by 1917. Mexico in 1917 could no more reconquer Texas, New Mexico and Arizona than she could invade Germany itself, the military balance being so overwhelmingly in America's favour that Mexican attacks would be suicidal, regardless of German financial support. The Germans apparently believed that Mexican nationalism and resentment of territorial losses would overcome rational calculation of military possibility, failing to understand that Mexican leaders, however much they might resent American power, understood perfectly well that challenging that power militarily would be national suicide. President Carranza's polite hearing of von Eckart's proposal, followed by quiet rejection, shows Mexican realism contrasting with German fantasy, revolutionary Mexico being more firmly grounded in strategic reality than the German Empire. The telegram's impact on German-American relations proves long-lasting and profound, poisoning any remaining sympathy for Germany among Americans of German descent, and contributing to anti-German hysteria that would plague German Americans throughout the war. German-language newspapers that had been defending German policy suddenly found themselves unable to explain why the fatherland was plotting to give American territory to Mexico. German cultural organizations came under suspicion as potential nests of disloyalty, with German Americans pressured to prove their patriotism by buying war bonds, enlisting in the military, and publicly denouncing Germany. The mistreatment of German Americans during World War I, ranging from social ostracism to actual violence, was fueled partly by the Zimmerman telegram, revelation that Germany viewed American territory as something she could dispose of as she pleased, making German Americans seem like potential fifth colonists loyal to a hostile foreign power. The broader strategic lessons from the Zimmerman telegram influenced diplomatic and intelligence practices throughout the 20th century, establishing principles about the importance of communications security and the dangers of overconfident cryptography. Germany's belief that her diplomatic codes were secure proved catastrophically wrong, demonstrating that ciphers must be constantly updated and that enemy cryptographic capabilities should never be underestimated. The German decision to use American diplomatic channels to transmit the telegram revealed arrogant disrespect for American sovereignty that contributed to American fury when the telegram was revealed. Zimmerman's confirmation of the telegram's authenticity became a case study in how not to handle intelligence compromises, showing that denial and deception would have been better than honest admission when the truth was so damaging. Arthur Zimmerman himself becomes one of history's great examples of diplomatic incompetence, a man whose clever plan to keep America out of the war instead accomplished exactly the opposite, through a combination of poor judgment, overconfidence, and spectacularly bad luck. Zimmerman apparently never understood until too late that intercepted communications can be decoded, that intelligence services routinely break diplomatic ciphers, that security measures he thought adequate were actually worthless. His decision to confirm the telegram's authenticity rather than deny it revealed either remarkable honesty or remarkable stupidity. Historians still debate which. His resignation in August 1917, less than 7 months after sending his fateful telegram, marked the end of a diplomatic career destroyed by a single document that seemed like clever strategy when drafted, but proved catastrophic when exposed. The American soldiers who began arriving in France in 1917 and 1918, fighting in trenches alongside exhausted British and French troops, were there partly because of a single telegram that revealed German intentions and transformed American public opinion. The doughboys who died at Belleau Wood and the Argonne might never have deployed to France if Zimmerman hadn't sent his telegram, if Room 40 hadn't decoded it, if Admiral Hall hadn't found a way to reveal it without exposing British intelligence methods. The outcome of World War I, the survival of Britain and France, the defeat of Germany, the shape of the post-war world, all were influenced by that single encrypted message sent on January 16, 1917. Proving that individual documents can change history when they reveal intentions that governments prefer to keep secret. The Zimmerman telegram stands as perhaps the most consequential intercepted communication in history, a single diplomatic cable that helps drag a reluctant neutral nation into a world war and thereby ensured the defeat of the Central Powers. The telegram demonstrated the crucial importance of signals intelligence in modern warfare, showing that breaking enemy codes can produce strategic advantages far exceeding the tactical value of conventional military operations. It proved that communication security is never perfect, that determined cryptanalysts can break codes that their creators believe are unbreakable. It established that managing intelligence, knowing when and how to reveal what you know, can be as important as gathering intelligence in the first place. In the final analysis, the Zimmerman telegram represents a perfect convergence of German strategic miscalculation, British intelligence brilliance, an American nationalist fury that together changed the course of the 20th century. Arthur Zimmerman, sitting at his desk in Berlin in January 1917, believed he was composing a message that would keep America out of the European war by threatening her with Mexican attack. Instead, he drafted an invitation for America to enter that war, an invitation that would be accepted, with consequences that would destroy the German Empire and establish America as a global power. The coded groups of numbers that seemed so secure when transmitted through German diplomatic channels would be transformed by British codebreakers into readable German text, revealing German intentions and German contempt for American sovereignty. That revealed text, published in American newspapers on March 1, 1917, would transform American public opinion overnight, overcoming years of isolationism and dragging America into a war that would cost 116,000 American lives and reshape global politics for generations. The telegram's revelation proved that, in modern warfare, intelligence operations can achieve what armies cannot, that breaking enemy codes and revealing enemy intentions can influence public opinion and government policy more effectively than military victories. Room 40's success in intercepting, decoding and carefully managing the release of the Zimmerman telegram stands as one of the greatest intelligence operations in history. Patient cryptographic work that helped determine the outcome of the First World War. The German failures that made that success possible, the overconfident faith in cipher security, and the catastrophic decision to confirm the telegram's authenticity became object lessons in how not to conduct intelligence and diplomatic operations, mistakes studied by intelligence professionals for generations afterward.
President Wilson, who had campaigned on keeping America out of war, who had proposed peace without victory, who had tried desperately to maintain American neutrality, found himself asking Congress for a declaration of war just 5 weeks after the Zimmerman telegram's publication. His patient diplomacy overwhelmed by public fury at German schemes. The congressmen who voted for war on April 6, 1917, were responding partly to Wilson's rhetoric about making the world safe for democracy, but more fundamentally to the concrete evidence that Germany was plotting to give American territory to Mexico, proof that German ambitions threatened American interests in ways that neutrality could no longer accommodate. The soldiers who deployed to France beginning in summer 1917, the armies that would eventually number 2 million men, were sent there because a single intercepted telegram revealed German intentions and transformed American public opinion. The battles they fought, the victories they won, the casualties they suffered, all flowed partly from Zimmerman's decision to send that telegram, and from Room 40's ability to intercept, decode, and carefully reveal it. The outcome of World War I, the defeat of Germany, the survival of Britain and France, the creation of the post-war order, all were influenced by that single document, proving that sometimes intelligence operations can change history as decisively as military campaigns, that revealing what the enemy intends can be as valuable as stopping what the enemy does. The legacy of the Zimmerman telegram extends far beyond World War I, influencing how nations conduct signals intelligence and how they protect their own communications for more than a century afterward. The principles established by Room 40, the importance of patient cryptanalysis, the necessity of protecting sources and methods even while exploiting intelligence, the careful management of how intelligence is revealed, all became foundational principles for British and American intelligence operations through World War II, the Cold War, and into the present day. The German mistakes, the overconfidence in cipher security, and the catastrophic honesty that confirmed the telegram's authenticity became case studies in intelligence failure that every intelligence professional studies and tries to avoid repeating. Arthur Zimmerman's telegram, drafted in Berlin on January 16, 1917, travelled through undersea cables and American diplomatic channels, was intercepted by British intelligence, was decoded by patient crypt analysts in Room 40, was carefully managed and released by Admiral Hall, was published in American newspapers, and ultimately helped bring America into World War I. That single document, those few hundred encoded words, influenced the course of the 20th century, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapons are not guns or ship-ups or armies, but information revealed at exactly the right moment to exactly the right audience.